Hey guys, Jason. And here recently, there's been a lot of audits of all the cryptocurrency coins. When new coins come out, one of the interesting things is to either follow or participate in the audits of these coins. Usually, audits of coins are trying to figure out, who mined these coins in the early beginning, who are the large holders of these coins, and just kind of get an overall feeling and informational grasp of these coins and the information that is perceived by them. Now, I will add a disclaimer before I get into the information. One of the problems that we instantly find with cryptocurrency coins, and I'm going to try to break this down. You'll have, say someone, mined up in the very beginning and they have 100,000 of these coins. Well, obviously they don't want someone to think they have 100,000 coins because that can affect the value and, trade frequencies of these coins to be, in layman terms. So you might have an account with 100,000 coins. So most commonly what they'll do is they'll trade, say, 30,000 coins to another account, which they own the address to. But publicly, they'll make it look like it was a trade for another coin, like they traded, a private transaction for another user for another coin. And so what they'll do is they'll do this multiple times through a hierarchy of, transactions. So the first account has like maybe 5,000 coins left. But if you add up all this, child accounts and all the parent accounts above those, you'll find that the original, 100,000 coins are still there. It's just a person tried to skew the numbers and skew the blockchain by masking those into multiple different clients and multiple different accounts. So anyway, to add to that, basically the reason I explain that is we see that a lot with all these new coins. People don't like to know how many coins they have because they don't want the public to have this outcry of, oh wait, this person has 20% of the coins, we probably shouldn't trust them. Where what they'll do is they'll break it down to a whole bunch of accounts and say, well wait, look, every single person has 1,000 coins, it's a fair market. So you always got to watch out for that, and that's one of the things audits do. They try to trace those back and verify those transactions. So without further ado, let's get into what I was really here to talk about. Now there has been a lot of a lot of audits of Litecoin and trying to figure out who's the highest owner and all this really interesting information that perceives to the people trying to buy these coins and invest in these coins. So they actually, and this is what I find so fascinating, they found the richest Litecoin account. Now this account has 2.6 million Litecoins in it. Now, as we all know, there will eventually be 84 million Litecoins. So this makes up 3% of all Litecoins ever, to be created. And, a lot of people are saying, wow, that's a lot of money. And it actually is. The current value, Litecoin stands at about $35 USD for one Litecoin. Timesing that by 2.6 million Litecoins, you'll get an equivalent of $91 million. So, I mean, that's a huge stake. And a lot of people worry, they say, oh man, this is really, really bad for the economy. And this is what I'm here to kind of denounce and kind of explain. It's usually not that bad if someone holds a lot of coins. A lot of times with these early coins, you'll get a few investors that will risk it all. Like, for instance, I talk about when I invested in Litecoin, then sold way prematurely now. But about how Litecoin was really, really cheap a few months, way back in the early the year. I remember talking about it was 8 or 12 cents, and it was really, really cheap. And for someone to go, they might have had, made a lot of money with Bitcoin, and they wanted to diversify that risk. They didn't want to invest in other, options like stocks or bonds in the real market. They wanted to reinvest in the cryptocurrency market. So they could have went in, took, at that current rate of $10,000 and bought up a large, large portion of Litecoin. And so when I talk to people about this, you have to take that into account. There are always those people that see these coins, and it's still happening today, that see these coins at a very low value and say, hey, look, I can make an opportunity about this. When I look for coins, the kind of what I do, play money, I take $10, $15. I'll look for coins that are really cheap, usually under 10 cents, and I'll buy as much as I can with that $10 to $15. Now, I don't nearly get 2.6 million of these coins, obviously, but it's more of, hey, even if this coin plummets, I'm out $10, $15. But hey, if in 2 years this coin's worth 20 bucks, I made a lot of money off that original $10, $15. Now, I always talk about schemes and everything. I look into more the structure of the coin and the reliability and a lot of more, statistical information, not just the price. And then that formulates into what I, buy and invest in. But one of the things that, people always ask me as well, does it matter, who holds so many coins? And I think I just previously stated, it doesn't really truly matter. It matters in a huge sense if you start looking through and 80% of the coins are owned by 100 people. For instance, I just read a report, and this is I'm about to do a video on this in a few days. Coin. There was an audit of Coin, and what was it that 27% of all Coin coins are owned by 72 individuals. And while that's not, that's mildly alarming, it's not, hugely, alarming. It starts to bring into question, how many people are buying this coin up really, really cheap, and now, what we call slowly easing out. What you'll do is, say you get, 500, and this is not, people aren't, collaborating on this. You'll get, say, 500 individuals that will try to buy up a coin, and they will, just because they see value because it's so low. And what they'll do is they'll release, 100 coins here and 100 coins there, but in reality, they own 2 or 3 million. That's nothing. But the market, there's so few volume on the markets, and sometimes these coins are only on 2 or 3 exchanges. So the volume is so low that the price then gets escalated. And these people are making tons of money just throwing out, a little bit of coin at a time and making a little bit of profit, what would be equivalent to like a dividend with a stock. In reality, they hold such a large volume, and the volume that they're releasing is so small and so, mimical that doesn't really do anything. But it, besides, escalates the price. And so people ask me, why do you care, that Litecoin 3% is owned by one guy? Well, it's not really that big of an issue, but it is if, those start adding up. If, Litecoin is owned, 72% by 3 individuals, then that's a worry. Now, obviously it's not, and I'm not, proclaiming that. But I just thought, I know I kind of went off a tangent here, and I'm sorry about that. But it's just, I thought it was really interesting that, this guy, whoever he is out there, it could be, now I will say it could be in a cold wallet exchange, but I don't think so. I think it's probably an individual because the numbers don't show like it's, a cold wallet with transactions going in and out, within weekly or, monthly increments. So it's most likely just an individual, which is so intriguing because imagine, and this guy could be watching my video right now, he is sitting on $91 million. Just because, back in the day, he might have invested 40 or 50,000 into Litecoin when it was worth a few cents. He took a risk, and guess what? That risk is paid off for him. And I think that's incredible. And that's one of the things that so many people are interested on these crypto coins. I have friends, and I actually there's a kid on my robotics team that I found out invest in Bitcoin and knows about Bitcoin, invest in crypto coins. And it just blew me away. We were at a robotics competition. We were talking about it. I was like, you be kidding me. You're invested in Bitcoin? And of course, me, I went on a tangent. But one of the things, I asked him, well, what do you mine anything? And he told me, and I won't mention it, but that he mined a coin. And I said, well, why would you mine that coin? He said, well, I obviously missed, some of these major coins, the train for it. But there's a potential that this coin could be worth something, in 2 or 3 years. And I might get the kind of returns that Bitcoin has shown. And, it was like a flame went off in my head. It kind of, or a switch just kind of clicked. It was like, this is what, the majority of people in these crypto coins are trying to invest in. So when you invest, you have to look at this mindset that people are looking into these coins not because, they see value, intrinsic value in them. They see them because they're trying to make value out of nothing, which is not wrong. I don't want to say there's nothing in it because a lot of these crypto coins have value, and I don't want to discredit that because there's a lot of really interesting coins out there that, add a lot of value to the crypto coins, but then there's a lot of them that are just what we call scam coins. So it's, trying to differ the two coins. And that all relates back to, and to make my final point, it all relates back to how many coins are owned by a minority of people. One of the things about Bitcoin was it's supposed to, the whole idea about these crypto coins and Bitcoin, it's supposed to, give money back to the average person. Well, how are you giving money back to the average person if someone holds, 30% of the coins? Now, again, I know it's nothing to do with Litecoin. It relates to the point that Litecoin, somebody owns 3%, which I think is awesome. That's a huge investment, huge profit return. But I just want to also emphasize, when you look into these coins, this is why people say the audits aren't important, and they are so important because it gives you kind of a mathematical and financial standpoint to who owns these, not who, but at what value and how many coins are owned by how many individuals. Guys, I apologize. This was a very long video, to my normal videos. It was more kind of a rant, kind of explanational thing. But I really want to stress this point of, first of all, validate coins, validate their value and their, true intrinsic value, not just pump and dump value or, hive mentality value. But also, this is something I try to stress to so many people, and a lot of people just kind of blow me off. And this is why I stress this so much. Look into how many people own the percentage of these coins. That's one of those things that worries me so much. People say, well, oh, it's not a big deal. I read a report, and I can't confirm this, so I'm going to do research before I do a video on this. But somebody was talking about how, it's believed that Novacoin is owned like 80 to 90% by one guy. Guys, if that's true, which I need to verify this, so don't take my word for this. I need to verify it. But if that's true, boom, get out of that coin. Doesn't matter if it has true value, doesn't matter whatever. If someone owns such a large percentage of the coin that they can control the volume to the exchanges at that kind of, fluctuable rate, sorry, that's kind of hard word to say, then it's an error that really gets transitioned to the average user, which and an average investor that you don't want to partake in. So anyway, guys, again, long video, but I hope I kind of taught you guys something about, these crypto coins, kind of explained why it's interesting to read through these audits. I encourage you guys to go look out on your own because I personally find them, so fascinating to read through these, reports, to look through the actual, blockchains and kind of get this opinion, but also, research and factual, mathematical and financial standpoint information to kind of correspond to what you want to invest in and what's a safe investment, what's more risk investment, what's a blue chip investment, what's a regular investment. It's just so fascinating. So anyway, guys, have a great night. I hope I taught you something. Peace.